All right, we're rolling. You were talking Matt Gaetz.
Because, of course, his father is like a hospice billionaire.
That's such a Dickensian thing to be a billionaire from. It's so fucked.
Yeah,
my family's money is in old people dying.
well, especially when the money, like all of the money in hospice is in signing up people who are not actually terminally ill. So like, so that you can just keep it billing Medicare and
like Jimmy Carter.
Oh, someone's making a fucking bucket off Jimmy Carter.
I know, and like they probably, I mean, he's like 90. He's 100 now. When they signed him up, they did not think he was going to be a whale. They were like, "Great job." You know?
I have
like, gold star.
my grandmother's fucking 104. So
That is
fucking old.
amazing.
And like they tried to put her in a home like 30 years ago. She was like, no. And now, yeah, she's just old as shit. No one's trying to put her in a home. They might forcibly like rendition her to a home at this point because they're not making any money off her.
Just one more quick thing. Felix, is your 104-year-old grandmother going to see the new Nicole Kidman movie about kinky sex relationships?
Oh my God. Oh, probably. Yeah. No.
Baby
yeah.
girl?
That's the other thing about my grandmother is that she loves like sexy movies. The first call I think she ever made with a cell phone was when she saw Y Tu Mama Tambien. You know, when she was only like, fucking 87. And,
She just put up her
she-
phone and started like filming trying to pirate the movie.
oh my! If she'd had a camera
Make
phone,
some
she would
the
money.
threesome scene.
She would have done that, but she called us like from the lobby. She called our house phone, like, and left a message. And she was like, "I just saw Y Tu Mama Tambien. It was very sensual." Like the entire family, us. But yeah, no, she's.
Oh my God.
The hospice, the evil hospice industry, making $0 off her. Zero. No one's putting her in a home.
She's like fucking up. She's really helping out in the life expectancy department though. You know, like she's carrying her weight.
He's throwing off the curve. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's insane. It's like there are like people in my family who are like, I don't know, like better people than me. Like one of our cousins was like, I think like we need to like do activities with her so she like drinks less. And she's not like an alcoholic. She just like she could, because she's 104, she can drink like a thimble full of vodka and be fucked up for a week. And like, why wouldn't you at 104? Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think at that age you should be allowed to
Yeah.
continue
At that
any
point-
bad habit that you
Yeah,
had
but-
thus far in life. Because
But she was like, yeah, our cousin was like, yeah, maybe if I like fucking go on walks with her, she'll drink less. And it's like, oh yeah, let's take her to fucking AA meetings and maybe she can pick up some shifts. No, it's over. Like, let her do what the fuck? Like, I get the impulse. She's a better person than me for suggesting that. But, I would
Yeah.
give her heroin if I was allowed to.
I can barely drink. I can't really even drink anymore. So like, I'm so impressed that somebody who's 104 can drink.
yeah, can you imagine
that's
what a
like-
hangover must feel like at 104 years old? Or maybe you just stop getting them after a while. Maybe it's like when you got drunk for the first time as a teenager and you woke up the next day, no problem. Maybe it comes sort of full circle and your body is just pickled enough that you don't experience the effects of dehydration and
it's
brain
like trying
swelling.
to like install a virus on a computer that is totally full storage. Like the body is just going through so much. The body is like, we thought we were going to quit 30 years ago, and now you're telling me I have to do a hangover? No, fuck that. No, there's no way.
Happy Thanksgiving week, everybody. And Felix and I are joined today by Moe Tkacik, a writer and investigations editor at the American Prospect. And we're going to talk today about the phenomenon of private equity and what they're doing to make our economy and society even healthier than it is now. But I'd like to begin because, just like sort of a bit of a hangover from last week, we're still talking about the Trump cabinet. And Mo, you just wrote a piece in the American Prospect about Donald Trump's cabinet picks. I'm going to affectionally call
Gang
it
of rapists.
the Doris Kearns Goodwin book, Team of Rapists. Because, in addition to their dog-like loyalty to Donald Trump, it seems like even among the lesser-known nominees, it seems like sexual assault charges or worse seems to be a common denominator among all of them. But I want to begin with Matt Gaetz, because he has withdrawn his nominee now. After resigning from Congress to be Attorney General, he's now withdrawn his nomination and is going to be replaced by this woman, Pam Bondi, Mo, who I know you know about, and I'd like to talk about Pam Bondi. But I just like to talk about Gaetz for a second. I think we got to begin with Gaetz. And I will certainly say, under no circumstances do you have to hand it to him. However, he has ensured that every Venmo transaction I make from now until I die, the subject line will be being awesome.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's funny to be like a soy groomer.
I mean,
oh my God, you're 17? Ah.
the thing about Gaetz is that, so obviously Gaetz has a lot of like fans, people who are like, well, he's really good on antitrust. But, it does seem like among all of these dudes, like he's sort of the least rapey, or the like, I would, his sexual assault or his alleged sexual assaults are maybe the most consensual.
Jesus Christ.
So there's that. And,
so like,
also the intrigue surrounding the investigation is so insane that, there's one of my sources is this like, antitrust. She's this anti-Ticketmaster activist. And, she's also part of like she was one of the most intense factions of the like Free Britney movement, which also Matt Gaetz is a part of. And there's a lot of people who think that he was sort of just wound up by this honeypot tax collector.
Yeah, Joel Greenberg. It is a weird story. Like, it's sort of like Russiagate, where it's like it wouldn't surprise me if they like did Russia stuff. Just like I wouldn't be surprised if Matt Gaetz like did like, groom a fucking 17-year-old. But at the same time, there's so much like weird shit around it. Like the prevailing theory that I've seen on sort of like the not MAGA, but sort of like center-right parapolitics people is that this was an attempt to like raise money to pay for an operation to like rescue an American spy in Iran.
Yes, who had been left out of a hostage deal that accompanied the Iran nuclear deal. Like, and the Israelis were really mad about it for some reason, and they decided to like leak it to the Dilbert dude. Like, it is so epic. I mean, it's kind of incomprehensible. But important to note that also Greenberg, who's currently in prison for sex trafficking and making fake driver's licenses and sending fake letters to a public school teacher who primaried him from allegedly from kids that he'd molested, that he left his fingerprints all over. So that guy, his family owns a massive chain of dental clinics that don't. So this is Florida. I'm just telling you, it all always comes back to some kind of Medicare fraud, or in that case, it's usually Medicaid fraud. They're usually doing pediatric dentistry, like doing root canals on like 2-year-olds.
What?
That's a thing.
That's a huge thing. Like, there was another chain. This wasn't in Florida. I think this was actually like a national chain where their thing was like Medicaid dentistry, and they would do all these horrible procedures to kids. And because you're giving like a 5-year-old a fucking root canal, they had these like full body sleeves that they would fucking put kids in so they would stop squirming when they were like torturing them.
They're called papoose. They're literally called papoose boards. Yes, this was Cool Smiles and also Small Smiles. There were two chains that had a lot of the same founders, both private equity backed.
That is such a sinister name.
Well, I think Matt Gaetz should be put in a papoose board. Keep his fingers away from the phone. But Mo, what do we know of the circumstances that led up to Matt Gaetz withdrawing his nomination to be Attorney General? Because like everyone is speculating about the contents of this House ethics report that's out there about him. But like, I mean, I've seen other people speculate that like Trump nominated Matt Gaetz as like an intentionally ridiculous and like it was like a sort of a sacrificial lamb essentially to get over his more egregious Pam Bondi. Like, what do you make of is this 4D chess going on? Do you have any idea of what's in this ethics report? And like, what exactly is alleged about Matt Gaetz here? Because I've heard a lot of things.
Okay, so what is alleged about Matt Gaetz is that he had sex at a party with a 17-year-old. And I think everyone kind of agrees that happened, but he didn't know she was 17 because she had a fake ID procured for her by his friend Joel Greenberg. And kind of everyone says that he cut off relations with her. She was in high school until she turned 18, which is really classy. I'm sure you can agree. And then when she turned 18, then he started, buying things for her, sending her Venmo payments again. No, he didn't actually Venmo her, but Greenberg did. So that is something that, like, I don't know if Matt Gaetz claims that he didn't or has, like, nothing to say about that. But I think that's the thing is that, like, I think that most of I think the girls who testified against him say that he didn't know that she was 17 when it happened. So yeah, he's sent a lot of he's sent thousands of dollars via Venmo to very young girls, but all of the ones that we know about were 18 or 19 or maybe even 20. Now, it's one thing that's interesting about this is like, well, I don't know, this is just really random, but when I waited tables, I waited on Matt Gaetz, and he was I carded the woman that he was with, and it said she was like 31. So, maybe she was a beard. I'm not sure. He was by far like the least, I didn't know who he was. Somebody was like, that's Matt Gaetz. And I'm like, oh, whatever. Like this was back in 2018. So, I wasn't up on any Russiagate or anything like that. But yeah, I think that, there is some intrigue. They were trying to rat fuck Matt Gaetz, but it's also possible. I think that when Matt Gaetz discovered that he was sort of under investigation, he decided to like start supporting Lena Khan and, and Britney Spears and sort of he started to take some, and Julian Assange, he started to take positions that might make him look like he was some sort of, that he was being rat fucked. So, he's a pro, and I hope that he, becomes governor of Florida. Pam Bondi is way worse. Like there's no doubt about that, but I don't think that Trump cares. I think that the Gaetz nomination was like, it's hard to think that it wasn't a ploy to distract from all the other sexual assaults. But again, I don't think that people are really distracted. I mean, the Pete Hegseth rape has captivated a lot of newspaper journalists, and I guess they haven't really focused on any of the Vince McMahon stuff.
Yeah,
I had totally like somehow like this is you talk about like Hegseth and Gaetz. It has flown under the radar that Linda McMahon is the nominee to be Secretary of Education. I mean, if we still have an education department in another 4 years, that'll be one thing. But like Linda McMahon, wife of Vince McMahon, and like the sex trafficking and rape allegations swirling around the World Wrestling Entertainment Association are fairly blood-curdling as well.
They are IDF caliber. They are really, really, really disgusting. And yeah, this poor woman that worked for him, and this is not stuff that happened a really long time ago. It's like 3 years ago, like I worked for Vince McMahon, and he made me have sex with him in his office, and then he shit on my head and then he wouldn't let me wash it off. And he made me have sex while I was like drowning in shit with his like friend while he watched. It's just absolutely putrid stuff. And it does make you think like, obviously this was Vince and it wasn't Linda, but she has been, all of these years very much, enabling this behavior, covering it up. And she's still fucking married to him. They're separated, but and then there's RFK who I don't even think that anybody.
The example that you use in your article is that I completely forgotten about this in the crush of other quote unquote allegations. Like I like filling out a cabinet with people who every one of their Wikipedia page has an allegation subhead.
The official theme song for this cabinet should be Clips, Mr. Me Too.
But you said that a former nanny of his alleged that he groped her, and when confronted with that accusation, his defense was, quote, "I had a very rambunctious childhood." And you mentioned that he was 46 at the time that he supposedly groped this woman.
I mean, to his defense is he had a very, very rambunctious youth. But yeah, it was in the pantry and he starts like feeling her up. And and he had 5 kids at the time. That was just, and I think that the way that he said, I mean, it's an interesting ploy. He said many times, there's so many skeletons in my closet, like, whale
Literally.
skeletons,
Yeah.
tiger skeleton, but
Goddamn Museum of Natural History over at his fucking house in Hyannisport or whatever.
Seriously. I feel like because he said that, nobody's even bothered trying to keep track of all of the accusations. So there's this one woman who's come out, and she was his nanny, but she was also like a legal assistant, and just absolutely revolting behavior. But he cheated on one of his wives so much that she killed herself, I think, and
name checked him in the suicide note as well.
Right, and then there's what's her face, Nuzzy, who apparently was the aggressor in that relationship. But it's just a real. It's like, again, he's so scummy that like nobody's even bothered to tabulate all of the cases. So it's really, Trump's really making, and one thing that I also think is weird, he didn't try to stagger these picks. Like, he could have gone with the gay Soros dude. He could have gone with, Chavez DeReamer. She runs some ketamine clinics, but apparently she co-sponsored the PRO Act. Like, he's had, since all the rapists were named, he's had some more, well-rounded candidates.
Yeah.
Candidates who don't have the allegations subhead on Wikipedia.
Yeah, it's the way he's doing it. My sister said that Trump's favorite thing to do is to take a bunch of hogs to market and watch them get slaughtered. And I feel like that's part of the strategy. Like, that's the rationale behind the Gaetz pick, 100%.
Yeah, that's
that much is clear. But what he'll do, the first day of announcements, it was okay, this is what Jeb Bush's cabinet would be. And then the next day, it's here is everyone who has ever been accused of grooming a 16-year-old. And then the next day, it's
Dr. Oz.
Fucking Soros, someone who would have been Hillary Clinton's Treasury Secretary, probably.
Absolutely, Mr. 3-part plan or whatever. Yeah, that guy. What is his name? I'm forgetting it now. But Soros was the seed investor to his hedge fund, and his seed investment was $2 billion. And I don't know how much Soros is worth at this point, but that's such a massive amount of money to start a hedge fund with. It's just this guy might as well be Soros.
Soros is worth $30 billion at this point.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it's hard to you read on any of this stuff because it's how do you even tabulate all that? But he's probably the single most successful currency trader of all time. I always want, all the people, I've met so many people who are Oh, I like voted for Trump. I don't like some of this stuff, but it's just like it's an opportunity to elect a businessman, and we need that. Why don't those people support George Soros? Like he's like a way better business. Like he made so much money.
Yeah, why not like just let Soros run the country? I think though is he a naturalized citizen?
No. He was born in Hungary, but like Hungary, there's no reason that Hungary has to be like part of Europe. There's like 200,000 people in Hungary. Just like make it part of Chicago. It won't even change Chicago's ethnic makeup.
Just the east side, the far east side.
Yeah.
But Mo, I want to go back to the proposed replacement for Matt Gaetz as AG. It's a woman named Pam Bondi, and you described her as the Eric Holder of the Liberty U set. What do you mean by that? And could you talk a little about her career helping foreclosure mills forge documents?
Yeah, I meant that like very literally. Because she got elected in 2010. And the two big issues in her state were obviously foreclosures and opioids, because it was the peak of the whole like strip mall pain clinic business.
And what state is she from again?
Florida.
Okay, yes.
Florida.
Pandora's box of maladies afflicting the United States.
She is, she's very blonde. I mean, she just has the most wannabe Sarah Palin face. So Eric Holder's two claims to fame are that he represented Purdue Pharma in its negotiations with West Virginia back in like 2003, and he got the company off with like, I don't know, $500,000 or something like that for like,
what a steep penalty.
1 in 3
for addicting an entire state of people to heroin.
It was truly disgusting, and all of the documents are still sealed, I think, and like, bankruptcy courts. I mean, it's just so that cesspool, he sort of embodies that. And then, of course, under Obama, as Attorney General, he wrote this famous memo about how they really can't actually prosecute any bank CEOs because it might, scare the markets too much. And I forget what the doctrine, there was some like really Orwellian name for this doctrine. So Pam Bondi comes in and she does her part. My understanding, I remember at the time I was writing about some state reps down in Florida who were trying to do something about these pain clinics, these strip mall pain clinics, because there were hundreds of them that had just sort of risen out of nowhere overnight. And she was just rat fucking them like every step of the way. But the big thing that she did was that there was at the time an attorney general investigation into this massive document forgery scheme that undergirded the entire foreclosure crisis, because all of those loans, all of those liar loans that people took out on their houses back in 2005, 2006, none of them were actually properly documented in any way. They didn't transfer the deeds. They used this weird database called MERS. And they didn't actually sort of, transfer the paperwork properly. So they had to go back and forge and backdate everything. And there was, there were a bunch of foreclosure mills that were involved in this. And, one of them famously had this Halloween party where they all dressed up like homeless people, took pictures of themselves, and it was ultra classy.
It's a classic hobo party. We've all been there.
Right.
Everyone brings a bindle.
Right. No, I think that was trash can fire. I think that was their defense, and literally it was like it was a hobo themed party. So Pam Bondi comes in, and these these investigators, these staffers inside the AG's office were investigating these foreclosure mills, and they were about to kind of bring a case against them, and she fires them. And she basically burns their documents. She won't let them share anything that they have with this. There's this like 50 state, foreclosure investigation happening, and Kamala Harris got her name, sort of became, very high profile associated with that. Florida would have actually sort of taken all the credit, but they weren't even allowed to participate in the investigation. It was like, so that's, those are, Pam Bondi's like first two things that she did in public service. And ever since then, I mean, she's deeply in bed with Scientologists. Israel, after Trump donated some money to her campaign, she dropped a pending investigation into Trump University. It's just like everything, like every possible crooked corporate lobby that you could represent in Florida, she works for them. And she's really cheap. Like she'll do it for like $50,000.
So this is a replacement that you cannot say she has some good stances on antitrust or Britney Spears.
No.
This is just
or
zero.
Julian Assange.
Yeah,
no, I
yeah.
mean, she really makes Matt Gaetz look dreamy. I gotta say, like, it's sad, but them's the breaks. Like that's the world we're living in. She's also dumb as a rock. Like according to people who have, I was reading this like Bulwark message board, and I don't know how I ended up on that, but there were all these guys
To see
in there
my
being
post,
like,
probably.
I've done events with Pam Bondi, and like, she's not intelligent. She's just sort of like a very classic, like, she's not a primetime attack dog. She's like a 2:00 in the afternoon kind of, person you would book. So she's just like, it's hard to imagine her as, because you look back at somebody like a Bill Barr, who, by the way, Matt Gaetz sort of blames for his own demise. And he was, he was so like bountifully evil. So it's really hard to imagine somebody like Pam Bondi like being quite like that sinister, but she's really prolific. I think that she'll plug away.
Yeah, like Bill Barr is like first team, like all deep state. He's like LaMelo Ball or someone. Like he's from like a multi-generational deep state family. And Pam Bondi, like the first time I saw her, I was like, who the fuck is this like the lawyer for a car wash? Like, what the fuck is this? This is the attorney general of a state?
No, I know.
She had a brief stint as a registered foreign agent for Qatar.
Mm-hmm.
So that might balance things out.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, Pam Bondi aside, like, you touch on this in the piece you wrote for the American Prospect, but like, when you see like the breadth of, shall we say, allegations swirling around the Trump cabinet, do you regard this as basically just like a incidental side effect of just the people who Trump would nominate to high positions in his government? Is just like this is the well he's drawing from, or do you see this as sort of like a broader and conscious sort of strategy of cultural realignment, of sort of putting Me Too back in the box and just saying, kind of like letting it be known that they're like, this is the way things are done when you're a powerful man? Because like you mentioned in the piece, like there's a brief moment when we seem to like crack open the window to reveal that like every major American institution, be it Hollywood, the music industry, USA Gymnastics, but like the fashion industry, just down the list, is just a factory of exploitation and rape. And like, is this a conscious strategy to just close the door on that and be like, not just close the door and deny it, but close the door on it and be like, that's the way things are? Or is this just, like I said, like incidental to the figures that swirl around Donald Trump and the Republican Party?
It definitely felt to me when I read it, I kept thinking of that annoying line, the cruelty is the point, But the thing is that with Me Too is that, you can, whatever, comedians can complain about getting canceled or whatever, but even the right absolutely understands that these networks of organized sex abuse sort of run the world. And they're very interested in how those networks work and exposing them. And so that's, I think, another reason that all of these picks and announcing them like all in one fell swoop just seems like such a like gut punch in a certain way. Like it had these real, 2004, 2005 vibes. And I just felt, especially the Hegseth pick. And so that's kind of what I was trying to comment on is like, what, like, and yet I feel like the resistance is sort of, powerless to even make that point because, they're the party of genocide. And that's what they've been doing all year. And they have been, and the rapiest people the universe has ever known. I don't know if that's actually true. But in my lifetime, the Democratic Party has been enabling that and funding it. And that's kind of, why it seems so, there's been so many things over the past year, through the billionaire boycotts and the anti-Semitism hysteria and the group chats and all of the oligarchs have been sort of conspiring in plain sight for the past year to perpetrate atrocities. And this just seems like part of that, we're back,
The feeling I immediately got after Election Day was that, this was like, it was like a continuation of 2004 or like a version of 2012 when Romney won. Like, it wasn't like 2016 or something like that. It was just like, it felt like a more of a return to form of like sort of a mishmash between like Bush Republicanism, Teacot and Tea Party shit, and then like a dash of Trump. I think like looking back on the previous administration, all the like craziest stuff they did, and then also all of the like desperate stuff they did was a result of like the neuroses of losing the popular vote. But now that like there isn't that insecurity anymore, I think, I don't know, in part it like causes him to make weirder choices, but in other parts sort of just revert to being a regular Republican. I think that I don't know how much people paid attention to like the Depp Heard trial, but when it was happening, like the sort of the weird vibe I got from things was almost like it was a bunch of people like accepting this as like permission to like stop caring about Me Too.
Yeah, that's
and it
definitely
preceded like an institutional shift. Like I feel like a lot of on the Republican institutional side, I think they do resent that like for at least like 5 years that like if Eric Bolling sexually harassed someone, they would have to fire him. That they essentially had to play by the same rules as what they saw as liberal institutions. And that there's like just a huge backlash to that.
I definitely think, and I think that you're right about that. I mean, obviously there were all kinds of right wingers who were amplifying, because I remember I didn't pay any attention to that, but my husband was giving me updates about it like every few minutes because they were pushing it out to him because he's in like, all these like Eagles message boards and forums and about like, the like NBA basketball and stuff like that. And so they were just pushing it out and it was really funny. But I think there was another thing that I felt like last year around this time when the billionaire boycotts started of the Ivy League, and one of the first people to come out and say, I'm not giving any more money to Harvard was Les fucking Wexner. And like he had literally like they're just like Virginia Giuffre or one of Epstein's victims had just come out and said, yeah, like I had to fuck Les Wexner all the time. It was really gross. And that to me was just like, oh God, this is it. Like that's, we're coming back now. And the guy who started it, like at UPenn, where I went to school. So I was hyper aware of these boycotts because they actually started prior to October 7th when Penn hosted a Palestinian literature festival back in September, and the Lauder family wanted them to cancel it but yeah, the first guy to come out and say, hey, you hold these Palestinian literature festivals, and sooner or later you get October 7th, was Mark Rowan, the CEO of Hollow, which had just, obviously, he'd gotten his job because Leon Black, the founder of Apollo, had sent $188 million to Jeffrey Epstein, was accused of raping multiple women in Epstein's house. So yeah, it did seem like those guys wanted, and there was this long story in Puck, and I don't subscribe to Puck. I kind of wanted to read it, but I was not gonna, pay up $40 or whatever for this. But there's this whole story around that same time about Leon Black planning his comeback, and he was putting it out there that he was just the victim of weaponized wokeness. And yeah.
It almost it kind of went hand in hand, the elite backlash to the idea that they could be fired, they were comedians or people on Netflix. It went hand in hand with sort of the counteroffensive against anti-Zionism, because I've said on the show a billion times that all politics now is a reaction and counter-reaction to 2020. Just people either who are still mad about whatever goofy shit people said back then, or people who are embarrassed that they were a part of it. I feel with
I think that's absolutely
Ackman, but this is a similar thing though. I feel with Ackman and Leon Black and all these guys who weren't, even if they didn't do the things that Leon Black did personally, they resent that that they'll have to leave their hedge fund because they committed sexual assault, and the rolling Zionism into it. It reminds me of the 2020 stuff because, no one in America is opposed to identity politics. They just want their own version of it. And for these people, they're all against wokeness and DEI. But the subtext, of course, of it is the only people that actually deserve to have identity politics are Jewish people.
Right.
And
it's
all this other stuff is goofy and we have to boycott it and get rid of it. But it's they're taking the form of what they perceive as DEI and applying it to themselves.
Yeah, it's just a war on Christmas, but for Jews,
Yes. Yes.
And that's totally, and the thing is that in 2020, I feel we all knew this was going to happen. People were saying crazy shit, and I mean, there were so many times at protests where one person would just, say something ridiculous or, and people were trying to abolish one another. And it's just okay, we know it's coming after this. And, it was just sort of delayed and very, very, it happened more slowly than I thought it would be, that it would. I guess they were waiting for another election, but they completely, have sort of adopted now this idea that colleges aren't safe spaces for Jewish students, and that they are oppressed and that they're ostracized and that they're sort of a minority that needs protection.
When they said that it's not safe to be Jewish at NYU, I was well, if that's true, then that's on us. That's we're not safe at fucking NYU, then give up. Judaism's over.
I'm pretty sure that white Gentiles were a minority group when I was at Penn. I'm trying to think, but that was in Trump's what was his anti-Semitism commercial with the women sitting at the diner.
Oh yeah, all those very Anglo-looking women who are oy vey, I'm so worried about Israel. I usually don't like Trump because I'm woke, but this time it would be Michigan not to vote for him.
I got that one confused with the Time Out for Hate campaign that Shaq did, Robert Kraft was behind that one, but you see it a lot when you watch NFL games. But what I like about that is it implies that you're taking a time out for hate, but it will resume when the clock starts again. Mo, I want to go back to that guy Mark Rowan, who you mentioned, who was the big Penn donor who started all of this boycott before October 7th because Penn hosted a Palestinian literary event. You have a quote from him in your article about him that I thought was astonishing. He wrote in a foreword to a book from 2012, he wrote, "Traditionally, we are taught to judge the success of a society by how it deals with the least able, most vulnerable members of that society. But shouldn't we judge society by how they treat the most successful? Do we vilify, tax, expropriate, and condemn those who have succeeded? Or do we celebrate economic success as the engine that propels our society toward greater collective well-being?"
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is basically, this is also kind of what the danger in this ever expanding definition of anti-Semitism is that these guys just want it to be like, just think of it, anti-Semitism as being distrust of rich people, it's like,
yeah.
And so that's kind of like, where Rowan is coming from. Rowan is like also, I mean, because Leon Black is so ghoulish and like, and terrible. And I actually heard from a source that knew that Leon Black, when his son turned 11, he decided that his son needed to not be a virgin anymore and hired a Russian prostitute to
Jesus fucking Christ.
to do the job. But yeah, so like Leon Black is this like, comically villainous creature. And Rowan is like the nice guy who wears sweaters, but he's like a pretty repugnant fellow. And after I started writing about Penn, because he was leading, he's the one who started the billionaire boycott of the Ivy League, and he did this in his capacity at, I think he might be the like board chairman of the Wharton School at Penn, and he was writing them emails like, the whole board of Penn, the trustees, and he has a lobbyist who's like best friends with Josh Shapiro. So like Josh Shapiro, and this has just recently come out this week, the way that Josh Shapiro was sort of micromanaging Penn's management of its crackdown on its encampments. And like Penn is not a political school. The encampments were like 2.5 tents, like it was, I don't think, they had a Palestinian literature festival there. But, I think that probably, 5 students actually knew about it. It's a very, very like small sliver of that school that is, showing their solidarity with Palestine. But yeah, I mean, they're on their high horse. And I was told by a former member of the board of trustees who resigned in this whole fiasco that the donors seemed to start getting mad after affirmative action was overturned because they realized that legacy admissions, or they worried that legacy admissions would be next, and that like and that like all of their, all of the millions that they donated over the years might all be for naught. And I was just thinking, like, how can these people, like, they think that legacy, like, no one's going to end legacy admissions at Ivy League schools. Like, that would never happen. This is not the French Revolution. But yeah, he's a pretty noxious character, and I think that he was supposed to be a shoo-in for the Treasury Secretary job, but I think that he basically concluded that he could have all the influence that he wanted without having to actually do that job.
I mean, when I think about this, like, this week or last week rather, the ICC issued arrest warrants for Yoav Gallant and Bibi Netanyahu for war crimes that they've done over the last year or so, and we saw, like, of course, over the last week, Biden spending the waning days of his lame duck presidency doing everything possible to protect them from international criminal justice and whipping senators in his own government to continue to vote for arms transfers to Israel. And I guess, like, when I think about this and like all the people involved in it, I think it really shows like the futility of people who think that like the election's over, like Gaza, like voters didn't really care about it, or like we should just, the idea, the fantasy that we can just focus on a domestic agenda when like every single person who's stopping anything good from happening domestically are also huge supporters of Israel who will not brook even the slightest disagreement or criticism or accountability for the state of Israel and in the many crimes it's done over the last year or so. And I guess like I'm thinking about this, like over the last like a couple of weeks since the election, Felix and I have talked on the show about this kind of strange strategy of displacement that angry liberals are going through now, where like they're reveling in the thought of deporting Latino or Muslim voters who didn't come through for them or betrayed them in some way. And it's like they can displace their own fantasies of what they want to do to punish minorities onto Trump, who will do it for them. And that way, it's not me doing it. It's Donald Trump, who's a bad person, but I'm just enjoying it. Do you think that there's like a similar strategy of displacement going on the right, at least as it regards to like their obsession with grooming and sex crimes? And like, look, it's been very politically useful for them because the targets of like, are institutions that are normally associated with the left, like the movie industry or the music industry. But like, what do you make about their obsession with protecting women and protecting children when given who they just tried to nominate to be Attorney General of the United States?
I mean, it's so astonishing. And first on the liberals having, being happy about people being deported. I mean, I was looking back and in the story about the rape gang, I was looking back at, the biggest moment, what Ivanka Trump has said is the lowest moment in Trump's presidency. And I think that the sort of crowning moment for the resistance was the all of the coverage of the children in cages and the child separations and the really, detailed and heartbreaking stories of, women being, thrown, locked away and, having their babies and children, confiscated, some of them while they were literally breastfeeding them. Again, images that, conjure, the West Bank, not Gaza, not to that point. And the public outrage about that was enough to actually get Trump to, overturn the policy and issue an executive order ending the policy. Now, of course, the architect of that policy is his border czar, so we'll probably see a return. But it's hard to it's hard not to just be astonished at the extent to which the libs have really just abandoned any moral high ground that used to be, that used to be their calling card, and all year. And I've been wondering throughout this genocide, like, well, how are you okay with this? Like, how everyone knows that this is destructive, even if all you care about is Israel, right? Like, even if you just care about the medium term for Israel as a state, like this is not going to make it easy to be an Israeli, as not that they care. But yeah, it's just gotten so out of control, and with the Nancy Mace, her outlandish, like, what did she do? Did she created a rule to ban what's her face from the women's restroom? Just that episode, which I hadn't even paid attention to until recently. It's just like, this is just sadistic and mean, and nobody, I don't think that this is popular. I don't think that Nancy Mace is making any friends by singling out the one trans woman in, this body of 435 for ostracism in this extremely humiliating and gratuitous way. That's gross. But could the Democrats really even say anything about it? No, because they don't have any moral compass, and they're like, that them ad cost us the election. And it's like, man, the them ad, the luggage thief thing, being reminded of that was not a high point for the Biden administration, but I think the genocide was a little more important.
Felix and I have talked before in the past about this weird act of projection, when people see people protesting against this war or protesting in favor of solidarity with Palestinians or for their freedom. And it can be discerned that anyone protesting is gay or trans. They immediately jump to why don't you go to Gaza where they'd fucking kill you for being gay or trans? Unlike me, who would never consider doing something like that. And I just think with Israel, I think it's the same literal an imperial project of where Israel gets to be the vessel that's our imperial proxy, in which like they can exercise good old-fashioned colonialism and all the attendant violence, both sexual and otherwise, that goes along with it. And that, like, if it can be shown that it's okay, if we can carve out this exception where it's all international law just does not apply, it is okay when they do it. And I'm referring to news reports from last week that one of the leading surgeons left in Gaza was raped to death after being kidnapped and thrown in an Israeli prison. That, like, if we can carve out an exception, then it's sort of like we're carving out an exception for us as well.
Yeah, that is what I tell people who, say like, well, I'm not a Zionist, but I don't care about any of this shit. Even if I like find that kind of morally repugnant, even just from a cynical angle, you should care about this, if only for the reason that like Israel is their petri dish for determining what is the absolute worst things they could get away with. It's kind of been that way for the last 30 years. It's a preview of, what we'll do to like climate refugees. It is a preview of what things will look like here if things get worse. Going back to sort of the liberal glee and the like current right wing the Nancy Mace thing. I think another thing we've talked about on the show a few times, and it's something that Josh Edinger Menton brought up a few times. It is sort of the story of the last two presidencies, and will probably be the story of this presidency. The idea that by virtue of us winning, that is a vindication of us doing whatever we want all the time. If we win, that means that like everything that people said was stupid or counterproductive, that means it actually worked. No one ever wins, despite anything, or, there were like, parts of their campaign that were stupid or didn't work, or policies that are unpopular. No, it's all popular because we won. That was like a weight around the neck of the first Trump administration. And it was also kind of the case with Biden. Like after 2022, after that midterm, they just decided like, well, no, yeah, there you go. No one thinks Biden's
right. And they didn't even win in 2022.
Exactly. But like
the Republicans still like got the stupid majority. Like, I don't know. Maybe they like it better that way, but
they absolutely do.
But the sort of new feature beyond like anything we want to do is right all the time because we won. The new thing is anything that happens to you is right because we lost. And any reason we lost is because of you and never because of us.
Right. And have either of you seen this BB Leaks movie that is about to come out? Or I don't know, it was leaked on Telegram. I haven't finished. I've just watched about
are these the recordings that like would seem to imply that they absolutely knew October 7th was going to happen and let it occur?
So I haven't gone that far yet. Damn, spoiler alert. These are recordings wherein, Sheldon and Miriam Adelson just like talk shit on to these, interrogators about Bibi and especially Sarah. I mean, it's like just a dump on Sarah. Like she is not going to recover. She is going to like drink herself to death when but she's already drinking herself to death according to these people. But so it's basically billionaires talking shit about Bibi and Sarah and how high maintenance they are and how basically they have to have like full staffs just for like, like lavishing them with like the right gifts at the right times, and how sick they are of their relationship. And, they trace it back to, I guess he won, in 2015, he won like a bigger than expected margin in the Knesset, and they just got high on themselves. And after that, like Sarah went from needing like, one bottle of like $3,000 champagne every day to like 4 bottles, and it's just one of those things where there's just something so astonishing about watching Miriam Adelson talk about how like just awful and like just how wretched she finds, these people who like you sort of think of as her,
The people who she's
ideological
dedicated her
soulmates.
life to supporting.
To supporting, yeah. And it's just like, oh my God. I mean, and this is a thing that that this is something that strikes me about Israel all the time. It's just like, God, these people hate each other so much more than Americans even do. Like, it's unbelievable. And that's what's so terrifying about the genocide is just like, this is the thing that is bringing all of you together, but it's actually making you more miserable. Like, how if surely you hate each other way more than you hate Palestinians, like, if you really think about it. Like,
Yeah, I don't know if you saw this post from like a liberal Zionist, one of these like, I don't like Netanyahu, but like actually any opposition to Israel at all is severely anti-Semitic. One of those people. And she said, I don't like Netanyahu, but it really says a lot about Palestinian society that the Israeli government offered $5 million in safe passage to anyone who gives information about where the hostages are. And it's like, I don't know how after a fucking over a year of this, anyone could possibly believe any Israeli promise of safe fucking passage. That's just insulting. But secondly, like the contrast between like how people in Gaza treat each other in the most dire conditions humanity has to offer versus just the way that Israeli society is, everyone is at each other's throats. People were ready to like gun down their neighbors and kill cops over the right to rape detainees. And they just cannot envision of any society where people are just not just stepping all over each other all the time.
To rape detainees with like burning metal metal rods. Like, it's just cause them, damage to their internal organs. I mean, it is like a level of barbarousness that like is that we haven't. I mean, I just feel like the media, people are not contending with. They haven't. It's all like they're topping themselves every day. Yeah, I don't know. Again, and I was glad when it seems really apparent that this is like a major block in the the Democratic Party like ability to sort of respond or contend with this. It's almost like the same block that Israel has had through all its demonstrations and its its constitutional crises, the like inability to reckon with the like Palestinian question. Like it's like it always seems so weird to me until we started arming a genocide for a year, and it's like nobody like is ready to talk about it. I mean, obviously, like people like us are, but if it's I can't talk about it with like my fucking Gentile family. It's like too weird. I should say my dad, who's a Zionist for some reason. We're like not even like Christian, we're Catholics, but like, there's no like Catholic Zionism. I guess there is now. J.D. Vance.
Catholic Zionist? That's so fucking
The Vatican
weird.
is the Catholic Israel.
That's so, I don't get it.
And
How did he get into Zionism?
I mean, he used to work at the Heritage Foundation, so I imagine that had something to do with it.
I don't know we're running up against time, but I did want to talk about a lot of the reporting you've been doing about private equity and its effects on the American healthcare system. But like, we've been talking in this conversation, like a portrait of a society and a government for which human life has approximately zero value. Well, the corollary to that is that human death and suffering is actually quite profitable. And I'm just like, your reporting that you've done on this, like the steward healthcare providers. I just like, could you talk briefly about like, just how private equity has used the concept of a bust out and has now like it has infiltrated every aspect of American society, but like with truly calamitous results in terms of like healthcare providers. Because you mentioned the story of Steward and like how private equity is, just draining money, just stealing money out of healthcare, out of hospitals and closing them.
Sure. So after the ACA passed, mostly this happened after the ACA passed, but like also during that, period, private equity firms started buying up hospital chains, and nobody was quite sure how they were going to make money off hospitals, because that's just not that, it's sort of a tricky business. There had been this, there's this classic business model that's been used in the nursing home industry since probably like the freaking 1930s, but where you sort of you take over a home, you buy some nursing homes, you separate the real estate from the operating company, and then you sell off the real estate and you lease it back. And you sell off the real estate for like an obscene sum, and then you take all that money and you force the nursing home operator to like lease it back. A bunch of private equity firms decided to sort of use this business model on hospitals, starting in 2010, and one of them was called Steward, and that was Cerberus, the Cerberus private equity firm. That is,
by the way, it's always a good sign when your firm is named after a literal dog that guards the gates of hell.
Yes, a 3-headed dog. Yes, it's also like Molly Jong Fast's dog's name too. Which I fucking love. So confusing. Yeah, so like Cerberus had zero experience in healthcare. They had run all these, they'd run a lot of retailers into the ground. Chrysler. They owned the Bushmaster, they owned this roll-up of every big gun company in America that after Sandy Hook had to file for bankruptcy to avoid massive legal bills. So they knew how to, they knew what the important part is, which is how to control the bankruptcy process so that you can kind of buy yourself 100% immunity and not actually have to pay anyone back. But yeah, so they started this kind of hospital chain with this surgeon named Ralph de la Torre, and he in Boston, and it was this little chain of Catholic hospitals. They had hired Ralph in a hurry because their last CEO had had kissed all these nurses without non-consensually, and
well, he had a very rambunctious childhood as well.
Yes, well, no, he blamed his Lebanese upbringing, which is
we call that doing the Cuomo.
Right? Yeah, totally. I had not heard that, the Lebanese take on it, though. But
well, it's the Mediterranean world. Those people are very, very hot-blooded and passionate.
So Ralph, who, I don't know if Ralph was into sexual harassment. He definitely is into much younger women. But at that point, he was still married to his wife, who he left when she had a stroke. That's the kind of guy this guy is. So he's a surgeon, and he tells them that he's going to make them lots of money by using this Obamacare institution called an Accountable Care Organization. And basically, involved in this idea, the idea is that if you get the doctors and the pharmacies and the hospitals all on the same page, and the insurance companies all on the same page, and then they can be incentivized to reduce unnecessary hospital stays. But basically what he saw was that they decided that in order to, properly incentivize doctors and hospitals to do all those great things and save all that money for America, they had decided to give fraud and abuse waivers to people who ran, certain kinds of ACOs. So he saw those fraud and abuse waivers, and he said, hey, I'm going to do lots of fraud and abuse. And basically he was kind of he bought these hospitals and then forced every patient that went to a doctor that was affiliated with the hospitals to do all of their surgeries in those hospitals, even if they, didn't have the tools or didn't have, weren't qualified or didn't have the space. And this
even though it was the surgical facilities were get a field just outside Gettysburg,
Right. Yeah. It's no, I mean, or they didn't actually have them. There was one lawsuit and they incorporated this fake prostate center of excellence in this fake urology center of excellence. And then
they just were fake dicks and assholes everywhere.
Literally botching circumcisions. And this poor urologist, filed a whistleblower lawsuit about it. Yeah, it's so sad. It's so sad. That was their first business model, and that just wasn't making money fast enough. So Cerberus is like, listen.
Have your infant bite down on this plug of leather before we go to work with it on the bris.
So Cerberus is like, listen, what we're gonna do to cash out on this, because it's been like 4 years now, and we gotta start fucking, taking some profits. We're gonna sell all the real estate that the hospitals own, and you're gonna lease it back, but we're gonna sell it for like 3 times the assessed value. I mean, just an obscene amount. So the hospitals could not actually, so they sold it to this like Alabama Real Estate Investment Trust. And for $1.2 billion, these hospitals that like weren't making any money, and they can't make their first rent payment. But that's okay, because the Alabama Real Estate Investment Trust lends them money to make that first rent payment. And then they just start doing this like series of like round trip deals or complicated, they started basically expanding this stupid hospital chain that is really bad to begin with. So that they own more and more and more hospitals and owe more and more to this Alabama company. Meanwhile, Ralph, the surgeon, is just like paying himself hundreds of millions of dollars through like every avenue that you can imagine, and buying and he leaves his wife and he like takes up with this like 26-year-old equestrian, and he buys her like a 500-acre ranch, and he buys like villas in Madrid and Costa Rica, and he buys the biggest yacht.
This is taking place in like while the hospitals in this hospital chain literally have a bat infestation.
So they are not paying any of their bills. Like in order, and people leave because of this. All these contractors, like they basically, they won't pay the exterminator, they don't pay the intensivist, they don't pay the dialysis company, they're not paying like the doctors. They do pay the nurses. And that's it. Like they pay the nurses and everybody else gets screwed, and they're not but they don't pay the like nurse staffing agency. So that there's all of these vendors that are owed they get cut off by like the local pizza place. They have their boar's head deli meat repossessed one day. I mean, it's really, really dark. and like,
holy shit, the pizza delivery places cut you off, and your ham is getting repossessed by fucking
deli
predators.
meat. Like, can you imagine repossessing deli meat? My husband's a chef, and I told him that, and he's just like, "Oh my god!"
Hey, just freeze it. It'll be fine.
No, they like repossessed all of the kitchen knives. Like, I mean, literally the stuff that
they're using those
and
for
by
surgery.
the way, they're repossessing. Yes, because I wish that were no. They didn't use kitchen knives for surgery, but they did repossess all of this important surgical equipment. And a woman ends up bleeding to death after giving birth. As a result of that. So there's all of these people like literally dying because they don't have, they don't have IV bags. They don't have, any wound dressing equipment. They just don't have any freaking supplies. And this guy, Ralph De La Torre, who's in charge, he's just taking obscene amounts of money out of the company. And there's people who are onto him. There's like short sellers, because this Alabama Real Estate Investment Trust is publicly traded. And there's this one short seller in London named Fraser Paring. And, he's kind of gotten really into watching Medical Properties Trust and Steward, because it's just like clearly there's so much fraud there. And also during this time, one of the places they expanded was Malta. They decided to they took this contract to run like 4 hospitals in Malta, and they didn't do anything. They were supposed to like renovate the hospitals into these destinations for Libyan medical tourism. And they didn't do anything. And there was this like journalist in Malta who was paying attention to these deals and saying, what is going on? There's this guy involved and he's got a bad track record. Well, she ends up dead in a car bombing that was like orchestrated by this like crony of the guy who's kind of greasing the wheels. And it turns out they spent $7 million on bribes to like the prime minister and various like other associates of him. So there's all this like obvious crime going on. Now, has
Felix,
anyone
that was literally
been
the plot of Steven Seagal's General Commander, by the way.
It is.
You remember the organ trafficking ring was run out of Malta in that movie.
Oh my God. There's so much. And they tried, and there's actually a guy that I listened to on, one of the many private intelligence firms that they hired. A guy, like left the firm and basically went to authorities. And I have like him on a recording, and he's talking about all of the things that Ralph wanted them to do. And he's like, yeah, Ralph was just asking like, how much is it going to cost for me to cut Fraser Paring's brakes? That's the short seller. So he's like literally planning, he's like maybe involved in this one assassination and definitely trying to assassinate like another guy. This guy has not been indicted at all.
In Malta, they just blow up your car to kill you, which is that's a tried and true assassination method. But like in America, they're like, oh, what if we cut the brakes on his car? Like, when was the last time that worked to try to kill someone? I mean, maybe I'm being very
Michael
naive
Hastings.
here. Yeah.
Maybe he was just trying to like put the like fear of God into him. I'm not sure. Yeah. But this guy, this was in London. I mean, they also hired Christopher Steele to get some British MP to like talk about how Fraser Paring was a tool of Putin. And, they're just basically running all these sort of like false flag, they call them false flag operations, but they're spending like obscene amounts on these private spies, spying on their enemies. They also try to catfish like one of their ex-CFOs. I mean, they're just completely out of control.
So like anyone who notices the just like wholesale corruption and theft going on, they will, intimidate, blackmail, or assassinate. And look, Mo, I know we've gone long today, but I mean, like where I want to get to with this is this. It's like when I'm reading your reporting on like how private equity works, and like if you are a fan of capitalism as an economic system, or you're taught about it in American schools, or you hear politicians talk about it, it's a certain story that goes like this. It's like the market is the best force that we have for like matching, human desire to productive capacity, or human need and want to productive capacity. And that like firms make profit because they provide a needed good and service, and like they employ people, and the profit that they make is a reflection of like the good or necessity that they fill in the market. Knowing what you like in covering private equity, like how doesn't the existence of private equity sort of like put the lie to that entire idea of how capitalism works? Because as far as I can tell, they don't produce anything. They just have money that they use to buy things and then destroy them and make more money in the process of doing it.
I mean, you don't have to take it from me. You can take it from fucking Steve Bannon, who just said this when, Mark Rowan was under consideration. Because, by the way, Mark Rowan is running an identical hospital scheme with the identical kind of, characters, and less Malta, okay, and fewer assassinations. But like, well,
you said he was a nice guy to Leon
Steve Bannon,
Rowan.
Steve Bannon just came out and said, I don't know why they would ever pick Mark Rowan, given how much, destruction private equity has wreaked upon the nation. I mean, there's like a lot of, to that point too, Bernie Sanders actually got the senator from Louisiana, whose name Cassidy.
John Kennedy.
This knows Cassidy. He's actually like he voted for the impeachment or something, so he's kind of a little out there, but he and Bernie have been holding hearings about Steward for months now, and they tried to subpoena Ralph de la Torre, this guy who's absconding with all this money while patients die, and this scheme left everyone without malpractice insurance, and all of the people who got were waiting on wrongful death settlements. They've all been screwed by this very corrupt bankruptcy court that is like private equity's favorite bankruptcy court in Houston. It's another story, but yeah, I mean, during these hearings, it's like Mitt Romney is like, oh my God, they can't even.
But this is just what he did at Bain Capital.
Romney, yeah, no. I mean, and Bain, like, literally,
it's one thing if you do it to Jeffrey the Giraffe, but doing it to like hospitals is another level of evil.
And one of the nurses at one of the hearings was talking about how, the elevators were down. And this is one thing, everyone's like, the elevators are always down. Like, people are dying while we're waiting for an elevator to the ICU. And she said that they gave them sleds to like push patients downstairs.
Oh, the papoose boards. We're back to it.
Full circle. And so, Bernie and got like almost everyone on this committee, Republican, Democrat, to vote to subpoena this guy, Ralph De La Torre. And then when he didn't show up, to hold him in contempt, as Steve Bannon had been held in contempt, and refer him for criminal prosecution for contempt of Congress. Now, that was, I don't know, that was like 2-3 months ago. The DOJ has yet to do anything about that.
Well, not only that, but this guy has countersued them for violation of his constitutional rights.
Yes.
For subpoenaing him in the first place.
Yeah, and he's hired this like guy who was like the lawyer to like everyone who was caught up in the
He's
in
also
the
representing
Mueller
Eric
case.
Adams.
Yes, and Eric Adams, right? Yes. So I don't know. Maybe that lawyer is like so smooth. The I was not very impressed by their by their lawsuit. But it's like if this activity, because like there's so many terrible, evil, sadistic things that private equity does. And it's kind of, I guess it's kind of hard to figure them out, or you kind of have to know a little bit about, finance to figure out what they're doing. But this is so blatant. I mean, we're talking about assassinations. We're talking about bribery. This stuff has all been very well documented. There was this group in the OCCRP, got 30,000 emails from Medical Properties Trust laying out the entire scheme. It's a publicly traded company, so there is accounting fraud, and literally nothing has happened, and it's just it's like that's this country now. So it's pretty depressing.
Well, we'll wrap it up there on that cheery note of just a country now just totally naked in the face of just outright just vandalism and theft everywhere all the way down.
Or don't get sick here. When I worked in restaurants, all the El Salvadorians they never wanted to go back to El Salvador unless they needed surgery, and then it's we're invest in some dual citizenship.
Boy, yeah. Jesus.
When I was reading about this, specifically the real estate scheme that you detailed in your articles, it's amazing because even removed from this, American healthcare is just it's the most unbridled profiteering every step of the way business in this country. Every single thing that is done, every procedure, everything that's bought, every facet of it is just maximal profiteering. Just looking at it before this, it would be how do you even up the ante? And this is how, by doing the fucking bust out from Goodfellas.
And then finally, when there's nothing left,
Fucking shame.
when you can't borrow another buck from the bank or buy another case of booze, you bust the joint out. You light a match.
Yeah, it's truly. I mean, and there's so many facets to it. Again, this bankruptcy court in Houston, if you want to do a bust out, head to the Southern District of Texas because they're all about it there. They're also today, there's this hearing going on right now about Alex Jones's, the judge who's very concerned that Alex Jones's media company is going to be sold to The Onion. He's I'm not sure that there might be a miscarriage of justice there. Well, he's the same judge who has been watching the Stewart case, and he's
the Onion. Oh. I mean, this is an antitrust issue. The Onion has gotten too big.
I don't think that's his jurisdiction, but no, that's fair enough. It is. It's got incredible reach. It's the deep state.
Well, we should leave it there for today. I want to thank Moe Tkacik so much for joining us. Mo, if our listeners would like to follow your work or check out some of your reporting about these private equity bust outs, where should they go? What should they do?
You can find me at prospect.org, or I'm on Twitter, Moe Tkacik. I have an E in my Mo, even though that's supposedly the girl version of Mo is supposed to be just M-O, but mine has an E. So I like to be ambiguous that way.
Links will be in the episode description.